You've probably heard it by now, car crash victims losing access to medical care, and some have even tragically died. Now, as a result of the recent changes to the state's no-fault insurance law, a new bipartisan bill has been introduced in Lansing. And here to give us an overview of, well, this ongoing process really is Tom Sinas from Sinas Dramus Law Firm. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Todd. How are you?
I'm well. There's been some big fallout from this 2019 no-fault reform that's happened. Can you kind of give us an overview of that?
There certainly has. And perhaps the biggest fallout came in the summer of 2021, so less than a year ago. The law, as you noted, was passed in 2019, but the part of the law that has really caused this crisis of medical care for auto accident survivors went into effect in July of 2021, which is why you're hearing so much in the news across the state of late of what is happening to auto accident victims. So what happened in terms of the law last summer to create this situation? Well, there are really two things that happened. The first was that the law drastically slashed the amount that medical providers who treat accident victims could be paid. It said, in short, for those services that are not paid under the Medicare system, which are many when it comes particularly to catastrophic injuries, for those services that aren't payable under Medicare, that the medical providers who take care of auto accident victims could not be paid more than 55% of what they were earning in 2019, or what they were charging in 2019. In other words, these medical providers were told by the government, we're going to set your price, we're going to slash your reimbursement, and you're going to have to find a way to survive on 55 cents of every dollar that you charged 2 years ago. That, of course, has caused many healthcare providers to go out of business, particularly those who treat auto accident victims. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that the changes that went into effect last summer slashed the amount of reimbursement that family members could receive who take care of injured loved ones who were involved in car accidents. This is sometimes referred to as attendant care. So there are thousands of stories of spouses taking care of another spouse, of parents taking care of a child. These families, many of them have structured their lives around the old law under their existing contract that says that they can be paid a fair market wage for however many hours of work they put in to take care of their loved one. Well, the law provision that went into effect last summer said no more. These people cannot be paid more than 56 hours a week, no matter how much time they put in caring for their loved one. So those two things came together really to create this horrible and tragic perfect storm where so many auto accident victims now cannot find care outside the home. And for care that's rendered in the home by another loved one, it's no longer being paid beyond that certain amount.
Well, as is always the case when there's a major change in legislation or policy, there's some things to kind of tweak. And there's a new bill in Lansing. Can you speak to that?
There is a new bill. This bill is called House Bill 5698, and it was introduced at the end of January. What's perhaps most interesting about this, there have been a number of bills introduced to try to fix this crisis. What's interesting about this bill is that it has so many co-sponsors that if you just added up the number of co-sponsors, it's enough for the bill to be passed out of the legislature. Now, it doesn't necessarily work that way, but this is a bipartisan bill, Republicans and Democrats. And what it's seeking to do is to try to address these two problems that I referenced. Number one, it's trying to fix the reimbursement rates particularly for providers in two respects. One, those providers that provide residential or a community-based rehabilitation program. Or number two, those providers that provide in-home care to auto accident victims. It's trying to fix the reimbursement problem for those providers and tie it to something that's more fair and that may be more survivable for the provider community. The second thing is it's adjusting this attendant care rate, this 56 hours. It's increasing that rate from 56 hours a week to 112 hours a week. Now, this bill may end up going, some of the language as we see right now could end up getting changed as it goes through the legislative process, if it does. But the basic idea is it's seeking to solve these two problems because, as I said before, it's really these two problems, particularly colliding together, that have caused such a crisis and have really resulted in just an almost incomprehensible amount of human suffering for people around the state.
Now, you mentioned that Republicans and Democrats were working together, gasp, but which is a great thing. But there's got to be some political hurdles here. I mean, these are the people making the policy, right? They're the ones that are trying to get these things passed that affect our daily lives. What are the hurdles they're facing?
Well, procedurally, the general process for a piece of legislation like this is that it's introduced and then it goes to the committee that it's assigned to, typically the committee being the Insurance Committee. Well, legislation like this over the last few years, the Republicans, they're the ones in charge of the committees, the Republicans in charge of these committees have refused to give these type of bills a hearing. And so far, as you and I talk, as of today, that's not happened here. There's not been a hearing. So if there isn't a hearing, even though you may have more co-sponsors than you need to pass the bill, if there isn't a hearing and the bill can't get out of a committee, well, that does create obviously some significant obstacles for the bill moving through the legislative process. So that, I think, is the hurdle and the question that remains to be answered here, particularly as we have another few weeks of the legislative session before spring break.
And I'm sure the families that affects are hoping that it doesn't stay stuck in committee over the summer. Where can people get more information if they have more questions about this?
Well, this is a problem that there's a lot of good information all around, a lot of excellent reporting. Our website is www.sinusdramus.com. We can be contacted in Grand Rapids area at 616-301-3333. But I encourage people, if they're interested in this issue, and I think everyone should be, to look across the board, because there's a lot of really good information out there for this problem, which affects not only auto accident victims, but it really affects the medical community at large. And I think that's something that everyone should at least want to be informed about.
Well, thank you so much for keeping us up to date and with this important legislation. We appreciate your time, Tom.
Thanks, Todd.